senior leader, and welcome to the Talent Sherpa podcast. This is where senior leaders come to rethink how human capital really works. I'm your host, Jackson Lynch, and here is today's cold truth. More companies are now comfortable letting AI run the entire hiring process end to end than they are letting a human recruiter do it. Which, if you've ever seen how messy some recruiting desks look, maybe that's not the worst idea. Yes, Dan, I'm talking about you. But here is the rub. AI isn't just automating tasks anymore. It's taking over entire work streams, right to offer, case to closure, survey to action. Once you hand over the work stream, you're handing over judgment if you're not careful. And that's where things get a little dangerous. Now, before we dive in today, a quick reminder. Please subscribe, comment, leave a review on your favorite platform. That is how we get the pod to grow. It's how the algorithm works, and it's how we keep pushing these conversations forward. Now, let's dive in. For years, we thought of HR tech as task automation, scheduling interviews. That was really helpful. Sending offer letters, sometimes not as helpful. Kicking out engagement surveys, helpful but tactical. That's over. In today's world, software doesn't just schedule the interviews, it screens the resumes, it runs the assessments, it books the slots, it drafts the offer, it pushes the onboarding paperwork. It doesn't run the task, it runs the entire work stream. And here's the kicker. HR as a function isn't built to evaluate that. Let me say that again. We're not built to evaluate that. Most HR leaders were never trained in the systems thinking or process design necessary to run something like this. I came out of industrial engineering, so I can tell you it's really not rocket science. Even I could do it. But it is a discipline. It has a set of principles and skills and tactics. And very few in HR have ever been trained in any of them. So what happens? The vendor shows up, the demo looks slick, and the HR team nods along. Meanwhile, nobody's actually mapping the process logic or pressure testing how decisions flow end to end. And that's not negligence, it's just a capability gap. But it's one that we cannot afford anymore. So let's get really concrete. What do you do and how do you look under the hood of a system? So here's what I think you have to interrogate. First, experience versus capability. Does the system privilege tenure and name brand resumes, or does it surface complementary skill sets and learning agility? Because if it's the former, you're just hiring resume stackers instead of problem solvers. And most people know how to hack a system that is looking for keywords. I was on the stage with Johnny Taylor at the Visionaries Conference with Sherpa over a couple weeks ago now, I guess. And he asked me, what do I think we make mistakes on in hiring for high-performing teams? That was my answer. We look at experiences over learning agility. It solves yesterday's problems, not tomorrow's. And we end up not pulling in people who have different ways of working so that we have complementary skills. And I shared one of my personal challenges. I once hired 54 people on my team. I hired every one of them, and they were all really heavy, strong drivers, which meant we got a lot of stuff done, but we had other shortcomings as a result of being not as diverse in our work practices as we needed to be. Anyway, let me go back to the topic at hand. The second thing I look at is activities versus outcomes. Now, most HR tech still loves counting activities. How many trainings, how many check-ins logged, how many resumes have they screened, but activity isn't actually impact. You don't get paid for meetings attended. You get paid for business outcomes, so you got to check on that. Third is conformity versus curiosity. Now, many systems reward sameness. It's a pattern recognition process. Of course they do. They clone your current top performers, which, again, is what you do when you want to make sure that you have a defensive hiring process. It sounds smart until you realize you are just replicating yesterday's talent profile instead of building tomorrow's. And then finally, it's the balance between static and adaptive. The real scarce skill is learning agility. Can your system spot people who adapt and grow in new challenges, or is it completely blind to that signal? If it's blind, and that's your selection methodology, you may never get to the people that you need to be talking with. So the interrogation really isn't just about what does the tool do. It's, is the system amplifying our blind spots, or is it surfacing talent that will drive outcomes? Now let's pause here and name something that's very uncomfortable. HR has not built the muscle for systems thinking. It's no one's fault. But if you came out of operations or engineering, process design is part of the air you breathe. You think in flows and constraints and failure points. You know how to map a work stream and spot where the system can break. But HR people, most of us were trained in employee relations, comp and benefits, talent acquisition, sometimes in org development. All valuable stuff, but it's not systems thinking. It's not end-to-end process design. And yet, we've been asked to manage end-to-end for quite some time. But that gap really starts to show up bigly when AI enters the picture. Because once AI runs an entire work stream, you can't just gut check it. You have to interrogate the logic and validate the data inputs and stress test the outputs. That is systems work. Now, the irony is it's not that hard. Even I could do it. It's just not native to HR. And until CHROs start building that skill set, either in themselves or in their teams, we're going to keep getting outpaced by the vendors selling us shiny tools. And then here's the accountability trap. Once the system is running, leaders act like the vendor owns the outcome. It doesn't. If AI makes a bad hire or misses a retention signal, your CEO is not going to call the vendor. They're calling you. And this is why the interrogation step matters so much. Because if you can't explain how the system makes its calls, then you're essentially outsourced accountability without permission. Let me put it differently and really plainly. Vendors can support, but leaders have to decide. And if you can't stand behind the decision logic, you shouldn't be letting the system run it. Now, the danger isn't that tech will fail. The real danger is that tech will succeed at the wrong thing. I've seen predictive attrition systems flag the wrong flight risk because they were trained on noise instead of signal. I've seen engagement bots report morale is sky high 2 weeks before an exodus, or without even thinking about whether the team is performing adequately. I've seen recruiting systems screen out exactly the kind of adaptive complementary candidates the business desperately needs because the system didn't recognize learning agility. So what's the common thread? Leaders trusted activity data rather than outcomes. They bought into the speed instead of the precision. And they forgot that automation scales blind spots just as easily as they do strengths. So let's bring this home. If you're a CHRO or another senior leader, what is it that you start doing starting Monday morning? First, I would audit your work streams, not just the tasks, the full work streams. Where's AI already running end-to-end decision chains, direct to offer, performance review to comp cycles, survey to action plans, wherever it is, just get them on paper. Second, interrogate those designs. For each, you got to ask, does the system prioritize experience over skill set? Activities over outcomes, conformity over curiosity, static resume builds over adaptive agility. If you haven't done that, you got a problem. So you got to do it. Third, close the capability gap. If your HR team doesn't have systems thinkers, go find them or build them. Hire them, borrow them from ops, train your own, whatever you have to do. Because without that muscle, you're playing vendor-led HR instead of business-led HR. And if you've ever gone through an RFP for any technology, just know that the people that sell it and the people that implement it are not the same people. You lived that, I'm sure. So have I. And then fourth and finally, reclaim accountability. Make sure that your executive peers know that tech can support, but leaders decide. The system doesn't get the blame. We do. All right, folks, it's time to land this plane. Or as my daughter says, Dad, you've been talking about HR systems for 10 minutes, and I still don't know what you do for a living. Here's the short version. 1, AI is not just taking and talking tasks. Say that 5 times fast. It is taking work streams, and that raises the stakes. Number 2, you have to interrogate the systems. Look for skill sets versus experience, outcomes versus activities, agility versus conformity. Number 3, HR has a systems thinking gap. It's not fatal, but it's real, and you have got to close it. 4, accountability does not shift to the vendor. It sits with you. Blind trust is not a strategy. And that's what I want to talk to you about with regard to adoption of AI in HR. Thank you so much for tuning into the Talent Sherpa podcast. This is where senior leaders come to rethink how human capital really works. A quick shout out to one of our favorite listeners. Hi, Kristen. Thank you for being a part of the Talent Sherpa community. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please hit the like button on YouTube, subscribe, leave us a review on your favorite platform, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, any place else. We are ubiquitous. Now, if you're a CHRO wondering where to start your AI journey, I would say you got to start with role design. And if that's the case and you haven't done that yet, please check out Propulsion AI at www.getpropulsion.ai. They are transforming how smart companies turn HR insights into powerful outcomes. And if you are an emerging or brand new CHRO ready to accelerate your impact, head on over to mytalentsherpa.com. We've designed resources specifically to help you navigate, elevate, and deliver results from day one. You can also sign up for the brand new CHRO Chronicles. It's a newsletter I've just built, and it's designed specifically for CHROs. And you can also sign up for the best-selling Talent Sherpa Substack there as well. Join 6,300 of your friends and read it weekly. Head on over to mytalentsherpa.com, and you can find them both in the banner. You also have a link to my coaching offerings. Lots of tools there. Let me wrap this up. Until next time, keep raising the bar, keep building systems knowledge, and keep on climbing.